69, I know, square miles is the size of Vineland's footprint. And it is the weirdest place in the world. Because where else in this country do you find urban and rural, gang violence, and farm country all rolled into one municipality, into one city? It's a microcosm of all of the pain of the United States.
Ooh.
We must have a high tolerance for chaos. Learn to embrace the flow.
Forgive all that we can't forget. Regret nothing we can't let go. For despite what we have learned, infinitely more we do not know.
So let us tune our frequencies
Until new vibrations grow. Let's pretend that it never ends.
And now, it's time to start the show.
Welcome to the Opus Marcus podcast. I'm your host, Marcus Aurelius. You are the audience, present and accounted for, and my guest for episode 3 is my hometown hero, Kevin Cummines, a composer, educator, keyboardist, and singer with a diverse output ranging from electronic music to theatrical and film scores, and commercial and experimental genres for choral and instrumental platforms. I'll be padding this episode with samples of Kevin's work. He sent me a bunch of choices, and for this first one I chose whatever.
Ever and ever and over, my friend, it's the end of the start, starting again. Pastoral fancies and scars that won't mend. It's a fine day to whatever. Ever and ever and always on side, sitting alone in a sea of old sighs, citing a song in a silence of lies. It's a fine day to whatever. Whatever and ever and over again. Goodbye is a moment that blood will portend, tasting metallic and ready to lend. Whatever and ever and started again. Forever is ever another assault, taking 10 lifetimes to cover the loss. Wouldn't it be nice to fall down in an end? Whatever, forever and over, amen. Over and over and once again wrong. Turn to a gargoyle beside an old palm, twisting and turning, protecting what's gone. It's a fine day for whatever. Ever and over and all of it lost. Bargain another hour only at cost. Fight 40 days for 1 minute to mourn. It's a fine day for forever, forever and over. Amen. Ever and over, my friend. It's the end of the start, starting again. Pastoral fancies and scars that won't mend. It's a fine day to whatever.
Wow. That was so beautiful, I forgot where I was for a moment. Oh yeah. This is the Opus Marcus podcast. It's episode 3, and my guest is Kevin Cummines. Kevin has been my friend since high school. After graduation, we went a decade with barely any contact until I relocated to North Jersey in 2009, and where I now work a half a mile from where Kevin lives and works. Now, this bio of Kevin I'm about to read is only a fraction of his impressively prolific resume, which you can view in full at kevincummines.com. That's KevinCummines.com. His website also features a comprehensive list of his musical works with free downloads. As a composer, conductor, and educator, Kevin maintains the integral importance of remaining as versatile as possible in his commitment to developing new music, whether for studio, film, theater, or the concert stage. With the classical training of Indiana University combined with the dramatic training of New York University's Tisch School for the Arts, Kevin is comfortable in any genre, but gravitates towards the setting of text and the development of narrative. Working directly with performers while developing new works is one of the greatest privileges of composing. Being a great lover of instrumentalists, Kevin is currently focusing on developing repertoire for underserved solo instruments and small ensembles. Well, I would call the Opus Marcus podcast a small ensemble, and myself an underserved solo instrument, so I'm glad to have Kevin here to help develop some repertoire. In this episode, Kevin masterfully breaks down the historical and social significance of our hometown, Vineland, New Jersey, and how it acts as a microcosm of the entire American immigration experience. The story of Vineland is one of a social experiment gone awry, and Kevin and I should know. We grew up there. Please open your hearts and join me in welcoming my dear friend and soul brother, Kevin Cummines.
Yep, so the fake bus stop.
You know, I've already had a conversation about
You
the
mean
fake...
the one in Germany?
There's one in Germany?
For the senior center in Germany?
Is it only in Germany?
That's the first one invented
So
for a
that's
senior
like,
center.
when I read that article years ago, that was the place they were probably talking
It was
about.
in Germany,
but
yeah.
they have them other places
and
now,
it was,
right?
and it was more or less. It wasn't an accident. I mean, other people have adopted the idea when needed.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the first place it happened was accidentally in Germany, more or less.
Accidentally.
Because they had a bus stop just down the road from the senior center, or the Alzheimer's unit, or whatever it was. But it hadn't been functional in years, and they had a lady who kept breaking out of the senior center, and one day kept trying to, and one day she was able to get out without anyone looking, and so everyone panicked, and someone bothered to look outside, and they saw her just sitting at the bus stop waiting for the bus. So a doctor went out and asked her what she was doing, and she explained what she was doing. I forget what it was. She was taking lunch to her husband at work or something. Her husband had been dead for 20 years. Whatever.
Right.
And then the doctor, who was thinking on his feet, says to the effect of, "Oh no, dear, it's Sunday. Your husband's at home waiting for you. You don't have to bring him lunch." And she said, "Oh, okay." And she got up and she walked back.
Nice.
And so from then on, when it was time to go out, she just went out, and then they, went out and told her something. depending on how creative they felt like being, within bounds of ethical, to get her to realize that she'd already taken the trip, or it's Saturday, he's not working, or...
It usually doesn't take much with an Alzheimer's patient.
No,
Like you can
no.
usually
Or,
convince them.
it's way past lunch, so you need to go prepare his dinner.
Right.
And by the time she gets to the house, she forgets she has to prepare dinner,
Right.
so she doesn't.
Exactly.
And then it's just become a trick for people the elderly who lived in urban areas, that when they go out, they're looking for the bus stop. And so when you have people, like especially in Florida and some of those places, if you have people who are New Yorkers, just put a bus stop out there.
Right.
If they're looking for the subway, they'll realize there isn't one, and they'll just stay at the bus stop anyway. It works.
What do you do about the silver alerts?
What do you mean?
The people that just get in the cars and, Alzheimer's patients
Oh, yeah.
getting in cars and shit.
My great uncle did that once.
Oh.
Great uncle. He ended up driving on the wrong side of 295.
Wow.
He was driving north on 295 south
Wow.
when he was pulled over in his gigantic Lincoln.
It's a good thing he was pulled over.
Yeah, that's when.
In
Well,
time.
it was like an hour-long manhunt before they found
Oh,
him
really?
driving an hour away.
Mm-hmm.
He'd been on the highway going the wrong direction for an hour.
Oh my goodness.
Uh-huh.
Probability just stacking up.
Yep.
So, what started this whole conversation was me letting Clemens out, because me letting him out into the hallway is the equivalent of the fake bus
Yep.
stop, because he
thinks,
wants to go outside.
Yep.
He thinks he's going to go outside, and every time it's the hallway.
Yep.
But he needs it.
Yep.
He needs to go out, and he needs to come in and be greeted and have his food and all that. It's really sad. But
No. I'll tell you why not. I was explaining this to my sister last night. Because we were talking on the phone, and Dot climbed up on my lap, and...
Dot is your cat.
Yeah.
I'm just telling people that will eventually be listening. He's mouthing silently that he did not know I was recording this. What a great way to just ease right into it. Ladies
You're
and
a good
gentlemen,
host.
Kevin Cummines, one of my dear friends. But anyway, so you have a
shithead.
Welcome to the Opus Marcus podcast.
Hey there, thank you for having me.
Your cat Dot looks
Yes.
looks exactly like Clemens. It's
The
just
long-haired
hair.
version,
Right, the long-haired version.
and he is a character and a half. I love him dearly. He's 18 years old now. He still thinks he's 4. Still mostly acts like it. But he climbs up on my lap, and he and I have conversations all the time where I say something and he meows at me, and I say something and he meows at me. But I'm talking to my sister on the phone, but he doesn't get it. So he climbs up on my lap, and I say something to my sister, and she says one thing in one ear, and he says something in the other ear, and I respond to her because he doesn't know.
Are you sure? Maybe he has the because cats have that heightened hearing.
Oh,
so
it's
maybe,
impossible to tell with him.
Maybe he's just adding to the conversation that you two are having.
But really, with where I'm going with the fake bus stop is his laser pointer. He has to play with the laser pointer every night.
Oh, those are great.
Yeah, and he has to. If I don't do it, he will sabotage something, or throw up on something, or sabotage something, or just attack me in the middle of the night.
Oh, so it's the ritual.
Yeah, it's so much the ritual. And when it's time, he starts his chattering changes its nature. And what's always tripped me up about the laser pointer is that he knows it's a laser pointer. He knows exactly where that little dot comes from that he's chasing, and he'll spend a half hour chasing this freaking pink dot up and down my living room.
Dot chasing a dot.
Yeah, and he loves it, and he can't get enough of it until his heart's beating a little too hard, and he tires out, and so then I just sort of twirl it around wherever he's decided to plunk down and lay there, and he just lazily paws at it,
Right.
and then I'll give him 10 minutes break, and then it's time to start running again, and we do it, and if I stop too soon, if my arm's tired, my shoulders bother me, I just don't feel like dragging the laser pointer all over the living room. That sounds awful. But, if I stop too soon and set the laser pointer down, he'll meow at me from the other end of the room, and I won't do anything. He's like, bitch, get over here. You want attention? You come over here. And he'll come over, but he won't come to me for attention. He'll hop up on the coffee table, and he'll start pawing at the laser pointer itself.
Right.
He knows exactly where it comes from.
Yeah.
It's like the fake bus stop is... I mean, they know, but they have their own fiction in their brains.
Sure. But they keep going.
Yeah, he's right now. He's pretending he is out on, or I should be specific. Clemens is out there pretending that he's stomping around on grass and hunting a rodent of some kind.
Right. Well, isn't that what they're doing? Even if it's a house cat, they're still doing that kind of thing
Oh, yeah.
instinctually. So
Yeah, in some way. And Dot's still chasing this red dot, which is supposed to be an imaginary bug. But the imaginary bug comes out of this little machine that his master, or his bitch, me, holds in my hand.
Right.
And it's totally just fine. It strokes the instinct, but he's too smart to know that it's actually real, but it still takes care of the instinct for him. He gets it out of his system, and he's good.
Will he jump up on walls if you make a couple walls?
Not a lot.
That's my favorite, is when they do that.
Yeah.
To jump up for it.
Not a lot. He'll run face first into walls.
Why doesn't that surprise me?
He'll slide into hardwood furniture, going exceptionally fast, and hurt himself, and then act like he's not hurt. Try and fake it, and then I'll just, press on the point that's tender, and he'll bite me. And it's just like, fake? You're such a poser.
So watch how I do this. Ready?
Yeah.
Where's Dot right now?
Dot is at my mother's house.
And your mother's house is in?
My mother's house is in our hometown, where I've stayed for the last 3 weeks, called Vineland.
Yes.
Deep in the south of New Jersey. It's... and actually, I'm the one who wanted to talk about this. And part of why I wanted to talk about Vineland was because of Progresso's, the food company, their television campaign. I have friends all over the world. I have friends all over this country, more so. And... in the last year, I have gotten so many Facebook messages. Oh, I just saw your hometown on a Progresso commercial.
Right.
And it was really weird because, you and I, we only live 2 hours north.
Mm-hmm.
We live in very, very different circumstances from where we grew up.
Absolutely.
I think your current home is at least a little bit closer to your childhood home.
Mm-hmm. That's because all of the childhood furniture, all of my family's shit is surrounding us right now.
That too. But I live in the complete and total opposite.
Yeah.
I live now in Jersey City, very much in a low income to moderate income urban neighborhood. Not as bad and dangerous as some parts of Jersey City, but certainly not where the money is. Certainly not, gun violence free.
Well, let's put it this way: 3 or 4 blocks down, and shit's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where you live,
absolutely,
it's not far.
No, not far at all. 3 or 4 blocks
That's
in
for
both
real.
directions.
The gunshots and the stuff going on in Jersey City is daily.
Yeah, two blocks away is the closest the gunshots have ever rung out from my own apartment. But where I grew up, also in Vineland, was extraordinarily rural, extraordinarily farmland. And Mark did not grow up. Mark grew up in Center City, Vineland.
Pretty much, yeah.
And so nice homes, nice blocks, but pretty close to the violent areas of Vineland. And that's the weirdness of Vineland. And this is, this is all part of the baggage that you carry when you're from New Jersey. It's in the 80s, it was the armpit of America, and everyone talked about that. And everyone's impression of New Jersey comes from flying into Newark Airport and seeing all the refineries with their smokestacks, pouring fire out of them high up in the air. And so they have this idea that the entire New Jersey is extraordinarily industrialized. Well, that's just what they see when they fly into Newark, whereas New Jersey itself is the garden state. Mm-hmm. And for good reasons. My mother's freaking gardens are amazing.
Pine Barrens.
And I can tell you they're amazing because I spent the last 3 weeks weeding them. And it is. It's in the bottom of the Pine Barrens. It's a resource-rich area for incredible farming. Absolutely incredible farming. The best produce I've ever had came out of my mother's backyard. Mm-hmm. And the second best produce I ever had came out of the other farms in Vineland. They had just been picked a day or two earlier than what came out of my mom's backyard. And the third best produce I've ever had is everything I've ever eaten in Paris. And that's the ranking. So Vineland is this weird place.
But people from North Jersey, when you tell them, oh, I'm from South Jersey, most of the
let's
people
back that up. When you tell anyone, once upon a time, when you told someone you're from New Jersey, they're like, oh, what exit? And I never got that joke when we were growing up because we didn't live on a highway.
Right. It takes us 30, 45 minutes just to get to...
Now it does.
Yeah.
When we were growing up, it took 2.5 hours to get to Philadelphia because the main highway, Route 55, that gets us the fuck out of Vineland, wasn't open until 1994.
Right.
They started building that when my mother was 10 years old. That was 1962. It took them 32 years to build a fucking highway.
It's amazing.
That's when they leveled my mom's neighborhood for Route 55.
Oh wow!
Because she lived out in South Vineland, right? You know where my family's company is. She lived across the street from that. Her house and 4 houses down remained, and then the rest of her neighborhood was the rest of her street because there was no neighborhood. It was all forest or farm around them.
Right.
But it was a street lined with houses for several miles, and just that, and no outlets off of that. Sheridan Avenue and whatnot, that's still pretty new. And all of her neighbors moved and left, and almost all of the houses, 4 houses down from her, were all eminent domain for this highway when in 62 when she was 10 years old. And again, they didn't finish the full expanse and open it to connect that part of New Jersey to Philadelphia and to the Atlantic City Expressway and everything until 1994.
Yeah, what the hell was that about?
It just took them 32 years to build a highway.
Wow.
That's the year I got my driver's license.
Well, there's still no... I said this in the last podcast when Pepe was here because we were
I love Pepe.
hating on Vineland then too.
Well, he lived in my neighborhood in in high school. We rode the same bus.
But there's still no direct train line that goes...
No, there once was.
There was?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. This is how my family got to Philadelphia and to Camden for their shopping. Because, when you wanted to go a little bit past... I'm trying to remember the name of the department store. My grandmother worked there as a bookkeeper when she was a teenager in her 20s. It was a department store on Landis Avenue. It closed sometime late in her childhood. You know
Newberry's?
the one. Newberry's,
Newberry's.
yes. My grandmother... It closed when we were, I guess, early teens. My grandmother was their bookkeeper in the late 30s and 40s.
That place was around for a long time. Yeah.
Much longer than my grandmother.
Right.
And my grandmother lived very close to that, and that's another story of Vineland. But, where was I?
Darn it. I'm supposed to keep track of these things.
Damn it. This is what I do.
Shit. It was a complete and total...
Oh, when you wanted to do your shopping. Yes. The, the train line out.
The train lines, yes.
Yes. You know where the train runs down the boulevard. Mm-hmm. That used to run all the way to Philadelphia.
Really?
Yes. And it was used both for public transit as well as industrial. In our lifetimes, that train route has only been industrial, but that train route is actually how my family's business, back when my family's business was first a feed company and then a coal company, that's how they got their supply. If you're going down Main Road, you go over what used to be railroad tracks. Well, when I was a little kid, a train used to go down that railroad because I grew up next to those railroad tracks. And every now and then the train would fall off its tracks and fall on top of my father's office. Literally, there was one day he's in his office and the train's going by and suddenly he hears crack and he's on the phone and he turns around and the train is literally now coming towards him and it rests on the building.
That's hilarious.
My father's office is a 100-year-old chicken coop.
Oh my goodness.
The 100-year-old, it's older than that actually, 110, 120-year-old chicken coop? Yeah, it held up the weight of an entire freight train once. Several times, actually. My father just happened to only be in it at the time once. Yeah, he used to wake me up in the middle of the night when it would go by in the middle of the night. But yeah, that was all, that branch of the train joined up with the main branch of the train, which used to run all the way through Camden, Philadelphia. And in the 1960s, when my uncle, who lived in Center City, Vineland, in my family's home there, it's been in my family for almost 100 years now, when my uncle went to college at Rutgers Camden, he took the train. He couldn't afford a car. He certainly couldn't afford gas to fill the car. He came from absolute poverty. His father died in World War II. His mother was raising him as a single mother all those years.
So you get to Camden from Philly. You got to go to Philly first?
Oh, no. You go through Camden, then on to Philly.
Okay.
Yeah, right. Camden's just the last stop before Philadelphia. On that train that no longer exists.
Now you have to go to Philly. first.
Yes. Unless you take the bus. You can take the bus, and the bus will run you through Camden before it runs you into Philly.
Right.
And that's something my family has also been doing recently for those who work in Vineland or live in Vineland and work in Philadelphia, and that can be anywhere from an hour and a half to 3 hours by bus.
Yeah, I've done it once when my car died.
Yeah,
I had to
it's
take
brutal.
The bus back down. Yeah.
And that's sort of what I want to talk about is this weird microcosm of Vineland that for so long was so far away from urban life, from Philadelphia life, from the closest city that was considered the epicenter of culture. And I had Philadelphia family that all in time relocated. I had Rittenhouse Square family, had a townhouse in Rittenhouse Square, that all over time either died off or moved to Vineland over the last 150 years. And it's this very weird thing that Vineland is so far removed and from advanced culture, let's say, or high culture, or high art. I'm not sure how to say this without being offensive to someone. That Vineland itself being sort of in the middle of nowhere, and having 3 towns that are neighbors, but no neighbors.
Well, that's what I was going to say earlier, though, is when you talk to people from North Jersey, they don't know that area exists.
Not at all.
Their idea of South Jersey is they'll say, oh, Tom's River, or sometimes Burlington. Have you been down...
Burlington, to me, growing up, was North Jersey.
Exactly.
And it's so very much in South Jersey.
It is South Jersey, but it's northern South Jersey.
And the biggest primary difference is that starting in Cherry Hill, that's where the money is.
Yeah.
You start in Cherry Hill, you move on to Mount Laurel, you move on to Burlington. There are plenty of very impoverished
Cherry Hill's the other one here. South
areas.
Jersey, Cherry Hill.
Yeah. To me, that was always North Jersey, because that's where the money is. And Vineland is very much not where the money is. It's where the beautiful gardens are. It's where the best produce is.
Okay, so why do you think that is? Well, and this has been an issue that anybody that's from there knows. We've known this about Vineland. Yeah. They've tried.
There has been industrialization that has come and gone.
The redevelopment of Landis Avenue, kind of.
Oh, that's what
would you call that? A failed experiment, or
barely an attempted experiment?
Okay.
They didn't do nearly as much as they could have, but that's also wrapped up in Vineland politics. But let's back up to why Vineland? What the fuck?
Yeah, why even talk about Vineland?
First off, because it is both urban and rural, and as such, it is still warring the same race wars and class wars that started with the riots of the 1960s. They've never ended in Vineland. They've been going, and they're much worse now than they were even when you and I were in high school. It's been happening because there's gang violence and farms. Because where else in this country do you find urban and rural, gang violence, and farm country, all rolled into one municipality, into one city? You don't find that anywhere.
A city with the largest square footage of any city in Jersey.
Yep. Not the largest population, but you're right. The largest square foot. I believe it's 16. Not square foot. Square mile, man.
What did I say?
Square foot.
Square miles.
69. I know. Square miles is the size of Vineland's footprint, and it is the weirdest place in the world. And it's been getting a lot of attention, for better or for worse, through this Progresso commercial.
Yeah,
but it is the weirdest place in the world, and that's what I want to sort of like demystify and unpack.
Okay.
Do you want to start with why Vineland? How did Vineland start? What the fuck is it? Or do you want to start with the Progresso commercial?
I'm just curious about the Progresso commercial.
Okay, so a year ago,
Progresso's headquarters is in Vineland.
Sort of.
Okay.
Sort of, and that's been some of the controversy that's emerged over the last 6 months. As a reaction, where other Progresso towns have gotten pissed off that Vineland's getting all the attention. It's like, oh, come on, bitches, please. Progresso's headquarters, I don't have the full history of that company. There have been times in our lifetimes when Progresso didn't have anything in Vineland, where they sublet their factory facility out to other companies. For instance, Goya. Or in the more appropriate Puerto Rican pronunciation, Goja. And being from Vineland, you hear both.
Yes.
Because of our Puerto Rican population there, and its own diversity even within a very complex Puerto Rican population. Absolutely. Contingency in Vineland. Progresso has maintained at least land holdings, but it hasn't always been based in Vineland, and it certainly has other factories where they make decent food all over the country, and in fact all over the world, depending on how you want to sort of like parse out the consolidated corporate structure of it.
Right.
But certainly other Progresso factories in this country, and I'm not sure about actually branded Progresso factories outside of this country, but for instance, Ohio. And again, other towns have gotten pissed off that Vineland's getting all the attention. Then Progresso's like, oh, well, we're going to, release a whole series of commercials featuring the different towns. It's like, oh, you pansies.
Sure.
And backtracking. And I think the reason why they wanted to do that was because Progresso has not been the most successful food company over the last however many years.
That's
and as any corporation has to do now and then, all corporations go through this. They have to, by the way, I'm a musician. That's my job. So, yeah, take this all with a grain of salt, but I'm also like an amateur sociologist and I can't shut my brain the fuck up. So, again, take it with a grain of salt.
You know a lot about what you know.
I try. My curiosity is endless. Why Vineland? Because Progresso, from my estimation, Progresso was trying to save its company, as all companies need to now and then, and they decided the best way they could do it in this market of holistic this and organic that and everything else was to show that their food came from real America. And Vineland serves as both urban and rural. It has the urban and industrialized environment that can support their function as a corporation. It has also the farmland to get them the produce and protein sources, chicken, etc., that they need to actually make their food. It's an all-in-one package. And also the tax laws are really, really favorable to companies down there at the moment. More so than in the rest of Jersey in so many ways. But that's why Progresso, and that's why the commercial, is because they're A, they're trying to save themselves, and B, they thought the best way to do it is to show freshness. And to sort of brag about being associated with this town that has a history of producing incredible eggs and vegetables and fruits and chicken meat, i.e. chicken.
So, is this commercial? I assume it's a skewed version of Vineland.
Oh yes, it's highly romanticized. It's extraordinarily colorful. I mean, it's practically Technicolor. The green pops out of that commercial.
Vineland's a beautiful place.
In some places, and it vacillates like everything else.
Yeah.
Even whole neighborhoods vacillate and have vacillated in our lifetimes. But it's highly romanticized. It's that typical food commercial where someone breaks, I'm literally demonstrating with my hands right, breaks the corn in slow-mo, the corn cob. No corn is grown in Vineland, by the way, but breaks the corn cob, and maybe a little is, I don't know, actually, I don't think it, no, a little is, and like the little dewdrops coming from the core of the corn cob sort of like splinter off into air and hang there in slow-mo, and then you cut the commercial to the tomato that has dew all over it, and it just looks so romanticized. And I'm sorry, I go to the farm markets with my mother, and none of the produce is covered in dew. It's too fucking hot. The humidity is not that high, though it is high right now. And yeah, it's highly romanticized. Of course it is. It's commercial. It's designed to sell you something. It's not designed. It's not a documentary. If it was a documentary, the colors would be considerably more gray and considerably more degraded.
Right.
And it would be impossible to shoot anything with integrity without finding a boarded up building in your screen. And that's the reality of Vineland. Its infrastructure is tragic. Its leadership has always either been completely and totally corrupt, just like the rest of New Jersey and Chicago, and Baltimore.
Also, it's educational leadership as well.
Oh,
that's a whole
elected school board.
Yeah, that's a whole
other podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. The Vineland BOE
that I have to tiptoe carefully around because I have family that are...
Well, we don't have to go there now.
Yeah, employees of the Vineland Board of Education. But Vineland It's well, let's talk about where it came from.
Yes.
It was a very intentional town. It was we would call it now. It was built by a developer. They didn't call it back then, but it was built in the 1860s, just before and further developed into what it became during the Civil War. During that very, very horrific period when the country was chopped in two and we only had half the land that we started with, and there was a massive war when hundreds of thousands of Americans murdered each other. An absolutely ghastly, horrible chapter. This guy named Charles K. Landis, who, when we were growing up was purported as this great visionary, turns out he was one of the most corrupt assholes ever to walk the soil of this already corrupt state. He was a developer, and he was developing towns. Mm-hmm. And he would get 1 square mile blocks of land granted to him by the state, and then he would turn that 1 square mile town into something appropriate for the resources available. So, for instance, Sea Isle City, one of the nicest shore towns in southern New Jersey.
Where I spent all of my summers at the shore.
Sea Isle City was built by Charles K. Landis.
Wow.
It started as a 1 square mile town granted to him by the state of New Jersey, and he developed it into a resort because the beach is right there. It's one of the earliest resort towns built in New Jersey.
That's amazing.
Which built most of its wealth out of resort towns for Philadelphians and New Yorkers. Mm-hmm. Vineland, very much, a 30-minute drive from the shore if you're going 60 miles an hour down country roads in the middle of the forest, which is extraordinarily dangerous to do, but we generally do 70.
It's fun.
It really is. Trees are flying by you, and you know you're going to hit a deer and die any second.
And there's actually a Route 666 down there somewhere.
There is. It freaked me out growing up because I grew up Methodist. A huge Methodist contingency in Vineland. But Vineland, given that it was so soil resource rich, Charles K. Landis built it as a center city area surrounded by farmland that was unaffiliated with Vineland itself. Because he didn't know how to build a farm community. You don't build a farm community. Farm communities develop organically.
Okay.
They have for thousands of years of much longer than thousands of years of human history. That's just how humans live with each other communally.
Yeah.
Once they develop this concept of we can barter for our goods and don't have to cover all of our base needs by ourselves, house, food, and clothing.
Right.
That's how towns, farm communities, rural communities, that's how agrarian societies are built. They build themselves organically. But Charles K. Landis saw what was essentially an extraordinarily sparse country farm community with very, very fertile soil and decided to build a small little tiny city in the middle of it to see what would happen. Essentially, it was almost a social experiment.
This is crazy.
And by my estimation, it is a social experiment that is, of course, as they all do, both succeeded in surprising ways and failed in very deadly ways, in very caustic ways, in very horrific ways. So it was established and built in the 1860s. If you can imagine, for I think it was a good 60 years until at least in the 19-teens or the 1920s, Landis Avenue itself, at least until the 19-teens, that was a dirt road.
Yeah.
It had many of the buildings that it currently has. They all look very different.
Right.
But Landis Avenue itself, named for Charles K. Landis, the main drag through that 1 square mile, framed on either side by East Street and West Street, and further gridded by a number system, 1st Avenue, 2nd Avenue, 3rd Avenue, or 1st Street, 2nd Street, whatever it is. That 1 square mile had the main drag, which served as all the stores and shopping, was surrounded by homes for people who supported that main drag.
Yeah.
And then the farmers had access to that through horse and buggy.
Huh.
And my family at that time, so we're talking a good 100 years plus ago, they were all farmers. My family were not immigrants in the 19th century, as much of Vineland's population is.
My grandparents are.
Exactly.
And they had a farm.
And we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
My family, on both sides, by all estimations, has been in this country for 300 years. I am the epitome of WASP. And my family has been in South Jersey for 300 years.
Wow.
My people have been farming and making glass products in South Jersey for 300 years now.
So we're the dirty immigrants that came over.
Well, and let's talk about that.
Yeah,
because that's where the story gets interesting. And that's where the story gets important, because somewhere in this, it's a microcosm of the entire of the American experience, in a very microscopic way, and it's a microcosm of all of the pain of the United States.
Ooh.
It really is.
That's deep.
So this is how Charles K. Landis pulled all of this off. It was a sparse farming community, not enough to support this 1 square mile city. And he had more land, Vineland Township, not the city of Vineland, Vineland Township, the surrounding farms and unclaimed lands. He had everything unclaimed granted to him, and some of it claimed eminent domain over to him. There's a long history of eminent domain in Cumberland County as a whole. And that's also a horrific history. And so he needed to find farmers. Well, Charles K. Landis was a really good student of history. The English colonized the United States, the eastern seaboard specifically, because you could get more ports that way, so you could have more shipping that way, which is how they were able to beat the French out of so much of the United States, which is why the French were our allies during the Revolution, because they were as pissed as the English as we were. And of course we screwed them, but we'll say that for another podcast. The way the English made that effective, and this is where my ancestors come in, is in the early 18th century. So we're talking in 1703, hitting its apex in 1723, and concluding at 1763. The English needed to put people into the colonies. But it didn't make any sense for them to send their own people to the colonies, because that would just dilute their tax base. They wanted to build their tax base. And meanwhile, there's all sorts of nasty wars and famines going on in what we would now call northern Germany. Back then, it was areas of Prussia, and it was northern Germanic city-states.
Okay.
Lots of war, lots of famine. This coincides with the invention of the tie, which we'll save that for another podcast.
Oh, jeez.
Oh, it pisses me off. Ties just piss me off.
Oh, me too. That's why I'm curious. But...
Teaser, look what happened to the Prussian army. That's why we should not wear ties. They invented it. Why are we still wearing it? Does Prussia even exist anymore?
Yeah.
No.
Oh my God, that's even crazier.
Yeah, we'll get there. So the English really more or less invaded with spies that area of Prussia and the Germanic city-states to convince people to move to the new colonies. And they paid for those Germans, let's say, for all intents and purposes, and Prussians. They paid for their passage and helped them get set up in the new world. That's why there's such a strong German contingency in this area and in this country at that time. And that's also why the Germans, at the beginning of the Revolution, the Germans here in the United States sided with England before they sided with the colonists. And it took Washington a number of years during the active war to convince the German settlers to switch sides to the colonist side.
Interesting.
And again, this is where my family comes into this. So my family's been farming that area since long before all the other families came. Yeah. But you need to increase your tax base. You can't pull from other areas of your tax base, which would be the entire United States. So Charles K. Landis in the 1860s and 1870s started going to Italy. He actually hopped on a ship and went to Italy with a translator to convince Italians, because Italy was in such horrible political condition, and there was so much starvation, especially in southern Italy, going on, that they were an easy mark to convince. And for some of them, he assisted with their passage to come to the United States. And since he was granted so much land, he did a rent-to-own system, or leased, or if possible, sold his land to the Italian immigrants.
Amazing.
And that's how the Italians got to at least South Jersey, and certainly to Vineland. To Vineland first, and then they spread out to the rest of South Jersey from there. It's because Charles K. Landis, who built this city and needed to make it work, went there, went to Italy and pulled all these people in. And that's when he realized this is what Vineland is for. He didn't know this when he first built it, but he came to understand when the Italians started coming, is that Vineland is an immigration city. It is a place for people from other countries to come and learn gently how to live in the United States.
You know, it's funny because I view Vineland as the place that I was sent to learn gently how to be like a human being.
Well,
on some sort of
Cosmic level?
on some cosmic level.
Okay, that's fair.
Before you can move to this level, we gotta send you to Vineland because there are lessons you can only learn by having.
And there's something there about surviving Vineland and either getting out or staying in Vineland.
So it's a place to start for immigrants.
And it's a great place to grow up for some people.
Oh yeah.
I can't say that's wow.
That? We should actually bring the microphone closer. So
do it.
What are we listening to right now?
You explain it. I'm going to go use the restroom.
Man, you read my mind. But yes, I will. While you're using the restroom, I will explain to people what this is. Okay, so behind my bedroom window here
I want some Buena Vista Social Club.
is basically a church, a house that has a church. They use it as a church. And, well, I don't know what it is exactly, but listen. Oh, it's singing and dancing. Oh, that's awesome. Yes, and so that will be going on now until probably 10 or 11, or until somebody...
And that's what Vineland sounds like.
That is exactly what Vineland sounds like. That is why Vineland has a huge Puerto Rican population. They have the Puerto Rican festival every year. I remember one time I heard music. I was outside doing God knows what, and I heard this music in the distance, very far off, and it was driving me crazy. I didn't know what it was, so I started to follow it at night, and I'm walking and walking and walking. I'm walking farther than I expected to, and finally, after probably, mile and a half, it was the Vineland Puerto Rican Festival, and I walked in, and I was the only white guy with a bunch of Puerto Ricans partying, and it was awesome, though. Okay, now you have to talk while I use the bathroom, or we can just pause this.
Oh, we can just pause this, because I have no idea what you just said.
I was talking about the Vineland Puerto Rican Festival. You said, what...
That's what Vineland... Well, I still don't even know what's out there. You can cut this part.
All right. We've relocated to the attic. It's a little quieter.
For now.
We were talking about the influx of Italian immigrants.
First Italians,
Italians.
which is how your family got here, and honestly, most of my high school crushes, their families as well. And that evolved in the early 20th century, and became a couple other things, and a couple other cultures coming to Vineland in small amounts. Ukrainian. But much of the Ukrainian was much later.
All my neighbors, the blacks.
Yeah,
and I don't mean blacks as in the color of their skin.
That's their last name.
Well, that was their last name.
They were part of the early Ukrainian immigration. But in 1946, immediately after the end of World War II, well, a year and change after the end of World War II, the move of Puerto Rican immigrants began. And that's when the real diversity problems start. But I don't want to undermine the earlier immigrant issues, because we have to start working in the KKK now. The KKK, of course, being a very ridiculous and expansive social movement in this country for a couple centuries now.
Now, is this mostly through the 50s with the KKK?
No, 20s.
The 20s?
It ended in the 20s.
Oh,
the KKK considered the Irish and the Italians to be as black as the African Americans.
Well,
so the KKK,
so.
You're even worse. Yeah, there's no hope for you.
Right.
So the KKK would rally throughout the Northeast against Irish and Italians, and in the early 20s, I believe it was 1922, but don't quote me on that. The KKK was having a rally. The entire city government was all WASP. But none of my family. My family was never that prominent. At least not before that point. But all WASP nonetheless, and the KKK was rallying against the Dagos, That used to be the pejorative term for Italians. And the Italian, the KKK had been getting away with rallying against all sorts of people for a long time, but the Italians were not having it. And the Italians stood up and beat the shit out of the KKK. 1922. Beat the ever-loving shit out of the KKK. And the next day, you can see, like, the mayor, the town council, all of, like, the prominent businessmen, they're all in bandages, walking with crutches, and it was so obvious.
That's epic.
It was
hilarious.
Very epic. And here is what used to be the best policy the KKK had. For all of its existence until 2006, the KKK had a firm rule. They had a list of towns where they had been defeated. And every member of the KKK is given that list. And the rule is for KKK members, you do not go into that town. You do not cross the town or city's borders. You do not support their stores by going to them. You have nothing to do with that town. When I lived in Indiana, I lived in a town where the KKK had rallied against the gay population in the 1970s, and the faggots and dykes rose up and beat the shit out of the KKK in the middle of and pardon me using those words, but it's in the 70s. It's the most apropos for the
we all know what you're
the population in the 70s.
Exactly.
And the KKK were no longer allowed to go into Bloomington, Indiana. The problem was their main headquarters was 20 minutes south of Bloomington, Indiana. And to get there, you had to use a highway that ran through Bloomington. So to not use that highway to get to the main headquarters of the KKK, you had to drive an extra hour out of your way. And KKK members are supposed to do this. Well, starting in 1922, I believe it was, the KKK were no longer allowed to go into Vineland. And so there were no more KKK rallies in Vineland until the year 2006 when the KKK...
Right, I was going to bring this up.
As an organization rolled back that policy and that list. And I was visiting, I think it was Megan's family, on Main Road.
Name dropper.
I was trying to be specific. You're going to have to cut that out. Yeah. I believe I was visiting Megan on Main Road. She was back from where she lives in the Middle East, in the Midwest. Family, I do too much cultural work.
Yeah.
And it was right there on Main Road, and there was a KKK rally going by her home, which is only 2 miles from my parents' home on the same road. And they had come out of Millville, where the KKK were still very active throughout our childhood.
Yeah.
But not in Vineland until 2006. And later that summer, I visited Indiana for one of my primary mentors' retirement party. A professor to whom I'm extraordinarily devoted and appreciative of her. And outside of her retirement party, the KKK was throwing a parade and a rally by Indiana University. And it was very disheartening to see that both in Vineland and in Bloomington again, because to me, the KKK being defeated in my two first homes, Vineland by the Italians, and I'm not Italian, but I always had a great love and appreciation for the Italians of Vineland because they were very much my neighbors and certainly my childhood crushes.
Well, they had a hard time when they first got here.
Oh, they had a horrible time. Yeah. Horrible time. Rampant poverty, rampant disease, and certainly cultural... what do we call it? Appropriation problems?
Yeah.
But this gets back to what Charles Landis built. When he realized he had built an immigration town, it's a place for immigrants to come and gently, gradually immerse themselves into America, to adjust, to, not resistance is futile, assimilate. There we go. I needed Star Trek to get me through that one. Yeah. To assimilate to American culture. And the anthropological and sociological models apply brilliantly, backwards, obviously. That, an immigrant comes to the new world and, old grandma, she never learns to speak English, but she makes her children go to school because for the first time they have access to a standardized public education, and their children, their sons especially, if we're talking about the Italians, they go to school and they learn to be businessmen, strong, and innovative, and they speak both languages, their home language and their national language, and they're bilingual from birth. And then they have children who only speak English and pat their grandmothers on the heads, and their families were extraordinarily successful because they went to school and they studied business, and they established themselves as standards of the community, of the business community, and their children go off and be artists and teachers. Just like we.
And then you've got the middle class.
And all their kids are artists and teachers who can't pay their bills.
Well, that's the story of my family.
That's the story of my family.
My great-grandparents had the farm,
Yep.
and then there were my grandparents who helped out and had their blue-collar jobs, and my mom was the first one to go to college.
Yeah, my family too. Same story. And it's interesting that your family and my family had the same story when my family's been here for 300 years and your family's been here for 4 generations.
Right.
But they both landed in the same area, just separated by 180 years.
It's amazing. I didn't realize you guys went back that far.
Early 1700s.
I mean, I had the experience of, so I did grow up in Center City, Vineland, and then moved out to East Vineland for the last 4 years I was there.
But you were an adult when you did that.
Yes.
You grew up in Center City, a nice part of Center City, Vineland.
True. Right. One of the oldest parts.
Yes. And the dividing line is perfectly summed up by my own grandmother. My grandmother, again, her family's been here for, by the time she was born, 200 some odd years. German, strong German stock, and English, but we don't talk about that. Her father was a farmer. Her mother, after her father died, maintained the farm, mainly a chicken farm for eggs, and they had a really hard time establishing themselves. And her uncle, who never had children, was very much a second father to her and her siblings. And her uncle had established himself in business and was doing pretty well for himself in a farming business. And he bought a farm in Vineland Township, not too far from Center City, Vineland, that his sister and her husband rented from him. And that's where they raised their family. And my grandmother moved there when she was 3 months old. And she spent her entire life in that house, on that property, from the age of 3 months until she died at the age of 86.
Wow.
And when her family moved there, it was rural. It was a farm. And it was a farm that you had to take a horse to get into town to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And she went to church at First Methodist in Center City, Vineland, because that was closer than South Methodist, which had been built for the South Vineland farmers. And that was her life. And by the time she died, same house, same land, she had been living for 40, 50 years in Center City, Vineland. She never moved, but Vineland moved. Vineland evolved. In the 1950s, Vineland Township was incorporated into Vineland City, and the whole thing became the city of Vineland. So my father, when he was 5 years old, got his first street address, and the zip codes came later. And when my father was 5 years old, his address went from being Vineland Township to City of Vineland, and really just in short, Vineland. So that was a small change for him, but for my grandmother it was a massive change because that began the urbanization of her own neighborhood.
Right.
And that's when houses were built across the street, and eventually a pharmacy, which is now a restaurant. And that's when the apartments went in 2 doors down, the apartments that became the ghetto for Vineland, the first ghetto for Vineland, for minorities and for the lower classes, what we now call them the working classes, the extraordinarily impoverished. And therefore, when the gang violence started in the 1960s, it started 2 doors down from my grandmother,
Wow.
who had already lived in that house for 40 years, most of that being a farm.
Wow.
And that's what I'm talking about, this dichotomy, this microcosm of Vineland. It is typified by my grandmother's experience of having grown up rural and died urban, spending half of her life in one, half of her life in the other, while never leaving the house.
Well, that experiment is still in progress to this day, right?
It is still.
Vineland is still serving that original function.
Yes. It ran out of immigrants in the 1940s, so it tapped into Puerto Rico. For many, many decades, there was a sign in the airport in San Juan that advertised, "Come to Vineland."
Right.
That was a fabled sign in our childhood. It was real. I don't think it's still there. But the primary immigrant since 1946 has been Puerto Rican, with more Ukrainian, more and eventually Korean, some Chinese, very little Chinese, but mostly Korean, and some Chinese, and a healthy dose of Russian Orthodox.
So why is Vineland in the state that it's in now? Why is it degrading? Why has it never built itself up culturally? Why has it connected itself?
Because we left.
Oh, us as in everybody who has left.
All the third and fourth generation people leave. They've learned how to live in America. They can no longer handle living in the confines of Vineland, the borders of Vineland, so far away from the civilized world, the culturally advanced world, Philadelphia, New
York City, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And they realize they don't have to stay. They left for college, and they don't have to come back. So, unlike my sister, who did come back.
Well, that's what I was going to say. What about the ones who stayed? I mean, I have friends down there. They have beautiful properties. They have kids and families. And
they maintain the tax base of Vineland. They fill the businesses when their ancestors retire. They take over the leadership of Vineland,
mm-hmm.
and that's been an interesting sort of sociological study. What is the last name of the mayor? What vowel doesn't end with, or what consonant doesn't end with? It was always WASP until the 1980s, I believe. Was the first Italian mayor?
Was that Romano?
Yeah.
Yeah, Romano.
Yeah, I believe so. So the Italians had been in Vineland for 100 years. Before the first Italian descended person had gained in his esteem enough to win over the voters of Vineland. What does that tell you about the voters of Vineland?
Well, yeah.
They hold on to their prejudices for a long time. They'll eat the Italian food. My uncle still can't handle garlic, but that's another story.
Oh,
actually, it's not another story. There was just so much anti-garlic everything in America in the 1920s to the 1950s, and he sort of grew up in that. Text message.
I was wondering what that was.
That was the original spice, not the text message, the garlic.
Yes.
That was the original spicy food of America.
Was
garlic, it's so spicy, please.
But
that was still considered spicy when I was a child by my family. Now, garlic was going fancy. Because my family was so old world. But now their current mayor, his last name is Bermudez.
Yep.
He's the first Puerto Rican descended person, and he is actually by birth Puerto Rican, to ascend to the mayorship. And his tenure as mayor, as much as it's being complained about, me looking from the outside back and maintaining a tie but not living there, I can tell you it's the reaction to his mayorship. It's been the same exact reaction to every other mayorship of Vineland, which is they're doing everything wrong. It's all bad. And Bermudez, he's being blamed for everything that's going wrong because it's his job as mayor to do that. And his Puerto Ricanness is being cited in hushed tones because you don't say racist things. Well, it's the same thing when Romano was mayor. Yeah. And I can remember members of my family who used to bitch complain about Romano, and there would always sort of be a veiled reference to the fact that he was Italian. And now those same exact family members look back wistfully and miss the Romano years with a slight tear in their eyes.
Well, those are the people that
your memories are so short.
The people that complain about Obama for that same reason,
yes.
that inherent racism.
And again, this is that microcosm.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And so why is Vineland in the state it's in? It's always been in that state.
State of limbo.
A state of limbo, a state of holding pattern, a state of not growing.
Right.
Because not enough people stay there long enough to build it culturally. It maintains itself industrialized with the urban poor. It maintains itself rural with the farming poor. It maintains its business class on a larger footprint than it did originally because now it's the entire city of Vineland. My family's business started as a feed company almost 100 years ago and is now an energy company.
Amazing.
It's the same chicken coop that my great-grandfather bought in 1926.
Yeah.
It's the same railroad tracks that were there for the most part more than 100 years ago. But as times have changed and as community needs have changed, the business has evolved to meet the bare needs of that.
Yeah.
But if we're talking cultural, if we're talking the things that make a community really a thriving community, the development of new art and therefore new thought, Vineland doesn't have that, because that only comes out of the third and fourth generation of an immigrant family.
Right.
Or in my case, 3 or 4 generations after you all arrived. So 200 years after, 300 years after my ancestors arrived.
Understood.
Vineland just didn't, well, that was a different in the United States. And that's another podcast
Absolutely.
that I've already planned. Yesterday at my computer, as a matter of fact. But we left. We are not actively teaching and creating in Vineland. We went where our new ideas could find collaborators and could find people who could accept new ideas, people who embrace new ideas. For you, new story, new poetry, new philosophy. For me, new philosophy, new music, new theater. Not necessarily in that order for either of us. We left, though. If you look at the theater scene of Vineland, they're doing the standards. They're doing good works. There's an active community theater with some really wonderful people involved. There's always been an active community theater in Vineland with some really wonderful people. And they license shows from MTI and the other companies, and they do the same shows that every other community theater throughout Middle America does.
Yeah.
But Vineland's not in Middle America. Vineland is a 45-minute drive from Philadelphia and a 2-hour drive from New York, where anyone can go and see new theater in New York or see just off-Broadway theater in Philadelphia. They're not doing those shows. They're doing Bye Bye Birdie.
I meant to ask you before, and I'm sorry I'm going off topic, but wasn't Vineland below the Mason-Dixon line?
Technically, yes. Vineland is below the Mason-Dixon line, because the Mason-Dixon line is the border of Maryland and Pennsylvania, and that is the part of New Jersey that does fall further south than the southernmost border of Pennsylvania.
And people say that about South Jersey, that it has this very southern quality to it.
It does, but when you say, oh yeah, I grew up below the Mason-Dixon line, people scoff at you. You're from New Jersey, oh! Right. Well, it does have this very southern quality to it. It does have a massive race problem. And Vineland and Millville both, bordering cities, very different from each other, both have very large black populations.
Right.
And so the primary urban poor is Puerto Rican and black. And any time in any city where that combination exists, you have race wars. That is Newark. That is Brooklyn. That is the Bronx, more so than Brooklyn. That is Chicago. That is Detroit.
When did we have the riots in the 90s? The Landis Avenue riots?
Oh, I don't remember exactly what year. Was it 92?
Probably. And I don't even remember what started it, but I remember there were riots on Landis Avenue. They trashed some stores.
I think it may have been a combination of two things. It was a reaction to Rodney King, which does make it 92.
Yeah.
And it was
so
also...
posers.
Yeah, well, angry people.
Yes.
Angry people finally feeling like they had it was a fuse waiting to ignite.
Sure.
And also the year before that, President Bush, during his campaign, Herbert Walker, I should say,
yes, in
91, did a rally on Landis Avenue.
I was there.
I was behind him because I played in the marching band.
Oh, wow.
So...
I remember then having just the bare minimum knowledge of politics and the world and what was going on, but I knew enough to know that he was a fuck.
I was with you on that, although we didn't actually know each other yet.
No, right.
Not really. We barely even met.
I don't remember actually how we met.
Oh, we had a class.
Oh, is that what it was?
Okay. We just sort of like grew into each other.
Right.
That's a whole other... We'll save that for the 12th podcast, right. The origins of Kevin and Mark.
We get deep into the personal stuff.
Oh, God help me. But... That's the basis of the race riots, and that's yet one more piece of the microcosm of Vineland being such a representative model for the entire United States. Is the race riots, is the urban poor, the industrialized poor, and also the farm community. You know, Vineland was able to save itself from a plight like Detroit's because it had its farming community within its borders. Mm-hmm. Vineland was able to save itself from a plight like Newark because it had its farming community within its borders. That's what has saved Vineland all of this time. Otherwise, Vineland would have been gone and taken over by the state decades upon decades ago, as Newark has been, as Camden has been, as right now we're waiting to see if Governor Christie ever takes over Atlantic City. God, I hope not.
That was going to be my question. Is I always felt that there was some sort of North Jersey conspiracy where all the wealth and the industry and the resources seemed to concentrate up there, and that it was almost intentional, that South Jersey was intentionally kept.
Accidental. And I'll tell you why. It's an accidental of the two great cities of New Jersey. New Jersey has two great cities. They are big, they are boisterous, they are phenomenal, they are not in its own state. You thought I was going to say Newark and Camden, didn't you? No, you didn't think
Almost.
that. No. It's New York and Philadelphia.
Yeah.
The two great cities of New Jersey are New York and Philadelphia.
Right.
Which city is bigger? Which city has more money? The one bordering North Jersey.
Yeah, so it just happens to be that way.
So that's why North Jersey is so much more Democratic, whereas South Jersey is so much more Republican. Mm-hmm. That's why North Jersey has so much more wealth, and that's why the wealth of South Jersey is chiefly relinquished to the suburbs, Cherry Hill, Mount Laurel, where people take the Patco train into Philadelphia to work, or the Jersey Shore in only certain parts.
That's why we say North Jersey and South Jersey.
Yes.
Even though there is technically a North Jersey, a Central Jersey, and a South Jersey.
Technically. Well, and also we have to throw in there, for most of New Jersey's history, it was actually East Jersey and West Jersey.
See, this is why I love having you here, because
that's so fucked up.
You know so much more than I do.
Well, just the whole East-West thing, it never made sense to me, but that's also why New York and Philadelphia ended up being the way they were, was because West Jersey was associated with Philadelphia for its entire expanse, which, again, makes no sense, and East Jersey was associated with New York, and those cities grew, whereas Camden and Jersey City, the sister cities on the other side, did not grow.
Right.
And that is also so much largely because those two cities are the main cultural centers of their respective states. Mm-hmm. Whereas Jersey City bifurcated itself with two cities that were sister cities and also therefore economically competitive cities with Philadelphia and New York. And those two cities, Camden and Jersey City, had to both grow within the same state structure, whereas Philadelphia and New York were able to influence their own state structure from afar for their own needs.
Huh. I know South Jersey has one claim to fame, apparently.
Many claims to fame.
This is a fictional claim
I'm
to
not
fame.
one of them.
There was an article once that postulated, based on the evidence presented throughout comic book history, that Gotham, Batman's Gotham, must be located in South Jersey.
It's interesting because the general assumption is Gotham is Times Square.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Times Square and also Hell's Kitchen. Hell's Kitchen and all the Daredevil, Jessica Jones issues being put in Hell's Kitchen.
Interesting.
Is because that was essentially the most dangerous part close to the center of Manhattan. Herald Square, Times Square, 42nd Street, 6th Avenue, etc. And of course, the Batman lore, therefore, being essentially associated with that whole Times Square area.
Right.
But where's this Gotham come from with South Jersey?
I'd have to look up the article because they were plotting like other cities. Like Metropolis is clearly here, based on this comic says it's here.
Yeah.
Further north, and then there's this city to the west is Philly, but it just. I forget what it was, but based on these sparse details from the comics, you could infer that Gotham had to be located in South Jersey.
Architecturally, it could never be.
Yeah, right.
I get stuck in the... Yeah, architecturally. Listen to me, I'm such an asshole. I
love it.
But, yeah. So what else about Vineland?
I don't know. I know we're a little pressed for time at this point. There's so much more we could get into, but the point is we got out. You got out much earlier than I did. What was your primary motivation?
I had to go someplace to be a gay man.
Right.
Right.
And
that's what's been interesting about spending the last 3 weeks there and spending another 4 weeks there, as I've been assisting my parents with some stuff on my off season. And I've been very happy to be down there, but I went out last night with my sister and two friends of hers, who are also friends of mine, but they're very close friends with my sister. They all work together. And, several really beautifully attractive men walked into the tavern. and I really wanted to hit on one of them, and I was like, no, you can't do that
Gotta
here.
be careful, right?
You cannot do that here.
We're here south of the Mason-Dixon
Yeah, it's
line,
not
boy.
safe. It's not safe.
Right.
And my family, my family, very loving, very open people, always, for their entire family history, but highly Methodist. And there's a quality to being Methodist that is I call it a little hypocritical, but I also see the logic of it, probably because I was indoctrinated in it growing up. It's you love all, no matter their faults, and in fact, the more faults that they have, the more you love them. At the very least, because you can look at their faults and say, at least they're not mine. And so you play it's like the Mama's Family pity party of the poorer neighbors than you.
Yeah.
The television show Mama's Family. I love that show. It feels like home in so many weird ways, and not because I lived in Indiana for 6 years. But it's okay to have gay friends when you're Methodist, especially Methodist in the 1980s. In fact, it's pretty cool.
Are you pitying them in a way?
No, you're just showing unconditional Christ love.
Okay, right.
I say that with a little bit of sarcasm, but that's
what you should be doing.
Yes, and there is a genuine quality to that, and it's good to have friends who have HIV, as my family did in the early 80s, still alive. I'm very proud to say and grateful to say.
Nice.
As so many of my friends are not. From the same disease, and much younger, therefore. But it's okay to have friends that are other minorities. In fact, it's good, and it's okay to have friends from other classes and meld, just not in my family. So, so much love shown to others, but don't date a black man. Don't date a Puerto Rican man, or a Puerto Rican woman, or a black woman. And don't... I'm not saying this is typical of my parents, but I'm saying this is typical of our family history, and typical of my family's history being old German, English, American, and Methodist the whole way, or almost all of the whole way. Not in my house is very much a phrase, and no gay. That's sort of the last minority that you're very much not allowed to be. And my parents have come a beautifully, wonderfully, and I'm very grateful, long way.
Absolutely. To
not just accepting me, but actually embracing me. And it took them decades to get there. They won't admit it, so I hope they don't hear this. They'll say they were all along, but that's also a conflict of definition. Their definition of what was acceptable was different from mine in the 1990s. And I knew if I was going to be myself, I didn't even know I was gay in high school. I just didn't have that word that I could associate.
So but at some point before you left, you knew you were?
No.
Oh.
I realized the G word applied to me on November 9th, 1996. I was at a camping trip with my fraternity. It was a service fraternity, not a social. Camping trip with my fraternity. And, there was a guy in the fraternity. He was a fifth-year senior, and I knew he was gay, and I liked him. I liked him a lot. As a person, I thought he was really everything so different from what I'd known my entire life. And he was, the son of farmers from very rural Indiana, and I knew he was gay, and I liked him. And November 9th, 1996, we're all at a camp out, and there's a big bonfire in the middle. And he's on one side of the fire, and I'm on the other, and I look across the fire, and I looked into his eyes, and I realized I wanted to cuddle with him. And that's when I realized the G word, which applied to him, which I had no problem with, also applied to me.
Wow.
So it's kind of like my need to go someplace else to be myself because I know what it is, but I don't have the language for it. It's not so different from Dot and the laser pointer.
Yeah.
He knows it's the laser pointer. It's not a bug, but he still has to have it. By the same token, or somewhat of a flip side of that, I knew I was different. I didn't have the word for it, but I had to go find it, and I knew that it was something that would not be acceptable in Vineland.
Right.
And to this day, there are people we know who have attempted... who are LGBTQ, who have attempted to stay in Vineland, and the cost to their mental health and the detriment has actually landed them into some really seriously bad circumstances.
Yeah, not that you're referring to anything specific or anything.
Which I'm not going to talk about on this podcast.
Exactly. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Child porn bust. Let's just leave it there.
Oh, whoa, you went there.
I did. I did. We can stop there.
But you know what? It serves to prove your point.
Yes. Yes, and that is my point. I couldn't stay. And so I went to the only college, my parents deny this now, but I went to the only college I was allowed to go to, which is the college that my sister was currently at, which was Indiana University. And I'm in many ways glad I went there. In many ways, I know of a different college that would have been much more appropriate for me, but can't change it. And there was a lot of damage done to me at Indiana because it was conservatory and it's brutal and it's designed to basically shred you of all sorts of, human dignity and any sense that you are, acceptable in any way, so that you will basically be able to survive a lifetime of critics telling you are shit. And to this day, I can handle a lifetime of critics telling me I am shit. Because I went to Indiana, but I had to go to the middle of the Midwest, to KKK country, in order to be a gay man.
Yeah, that's great.
And then the next problem is, my sister went there for music education. She went there to learn to teach. And that's why she was able to go back, was because there was work waiting for her, and eventually she found what is a very painful, extremely exceptional job, and she does the best job of it of anyone who's held that extraordinarily esteemed and extraordinarily painful teaching job, that position. It's an exalted position in the system, and it's an important job that she does, and she had that opportunity because she learned to be a teacher, and her need is to teach, and she has done that, and she was able to do that in Vineland. So that's how she was able to come back. But me, I learned to be a writer.
Yeah.
There is no new music in Vineland. And new music, on the whole, in the United States, is looked upon with disdain by the vast majority of the population, who are completely and totally ignorant that it even exists. And when they hear it, they just think it's noise, or they have a nasty reaction to it, or whatever. It's fine. We can talk about that on another podcast, education and whatnot, because it's the other side of what I do. But there is no way for me to have any sort of voice or expression for what I know how to do in Vineland.
Right.
I did my MFA in musical theater writing, and there is no new theater in Vineland. There is, the high school just did Mary Poppins a year ago. That's new theater. It's great, but Rodgers and Hammerstein could have written it. It's not Fun Home. It's not Color Purple. It's not everything Lin-Manuel Miranda has done, and they can't get an audience for that material in Vineland. If you're in Vineland and you want to see that, you have no problem going to New York City. But when I moved to New York City, it was really sort of traumatic to some of my family, and the rest of my family just sort of hid their trauma, because when you're from Vineland, or at least as long as my family is from Vineland, you don't leave Vineland. You don't leave Vineland.
It broke my grandmother's heart.
Oh yeah.
Before.
Yeah, and my grandmother understood that I needed to go, and she understood without being a scholar herself, but just being a very wise woman. She understood that generational thing where the fourth generation has to leave.
Yeah.
They have to go and do something someplace else to realize their full humanity, whether it's because the last three generations are still alive and still running the show, and they need to go learn how to run the show without the other generations looking down on them and constantly correcting them, or it's because they have new ideas that just aren't going to market in Vineland,
right,
in that kind of community that is both urban poor and also rural poor.
Well, and that just connects to that's a larger story of you leave the quote-unquote small town and you go to the big city, and you make something of yourself.
Or you fail and you move back.
Right.
And I'm waiting every day to just fail and move back.
I mean, that's why talking about Vineland is important to me, because in the beginning I said, why even talk about Vineland? But that's the theme. The theme is, for me, what you're saying is I didn't start growing as a person. I feel like I didn't really come into full adulthood until after I left there.
And by left there, you mean when you left there, not when you were in college.
Oh, no, college, no, because I came back. I had the chance to stay out and copped out and came back.
You were a Vinelander the entire time you were in college.
Yes, absolutely.
I was not.
Right.
I was a gay man.
Yeah.
And that became my identity.
That was your split, right.
And that allowed me to adopt a new identity to fill in the indoctrinated Vineland identity. So I would at least have something I could say I was. Because I was no longer, the moment I said, oh my God, I'm gay, and the moment I looked at Bradley with a panic attack and said, that was the beautiful man across the fire there.
Yeah.
The moment I looked at Bradley in a panic attack and said, I'm gay with tears in my eyes, like it was the most horrific and horrible thing I could be. And he said, "You're okay. It's going to be okay." Words I will never forget, and words that come back to me in everything I go through. That's when I realized I could no longer be a Vineland.
I have to ask, did you guys cuddle?
No. No.
Sorry.
Because I found out he was already very, very much taken.
Oh, right.
So I never, but we did forge a friendship.
That's good.
And I do love the guy very much. He's wonderful. He's a wonderful human being. I'm very proud of all he's accomplished in his life and all he's escaped as well. And as I am proud of what little I've accomplished and all that I have escaped. I'm still escaping.
Extremely proud of you because I've known you for a
thank
long
you.
time, and I know where you were and who you were and who you become. And just to wrap this up, I guess, I'm forever indebted to you because
I can't imagine why.
Well, come get the hell out of here.
I can't.
When I first came up here, I was living with Brian, who, granted, that was a nice transition because here's my best friend since 3rd grade.
Yeah.
But then
Brian's a great guy.
But then suddenly, here's Kevin, and we connect on a completely different level.
Yes.
And it was such a relief. I mean, you still live a half a mile from where I work. Mm-hmm. And just this friendship got rekindled, and before that, our friendship was never at a level that deep as it's become since.
We were friendly,
but yeah, this was. I don't think there's a lot of times where I don't think I could have done it without you.
Well, I will say this: I remember the night that we went to that diner on Delsey Drive.
Oh yes, I remember it clearly.
You were wearing a dark gray hoodie, as you so often do.
Hair a complete blob mess.
And
I was a mess.
You were.
Yeah, I was at a very low point.
And I was okay with that, but I was wondering which direction you were going to go.
Yeah, you had asked me if I had thought about coming up there, and then you called me a few days later. It was. I'd
only just moved up there a year before.
I know, but your intention was so. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but you're like, look, they're looking for a resident advisor or whatever it was. You were trying for me.
Yeah.
You hadn't seen me in years. You saw me at the diner, and then a few days later, you were following up, which meant something.
Well,
I mean, it didn't go anywhere, and I didn't.
It did go somewhere. You are a tenured teacher at a charter school in Jersey City.
Oh, good Lord.
Let's record that. Let's re-record that.
No. I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Just the just realizing it, going through that realization, like, yep, that's what I do.
Yes, that's not who you were when we were at that golden pigeon thing.
Well, that's certainly true.
And you had horribly destructive relationship back then. That was nowhere near close to
that kind of
ending.
carried on into the. But yes,
and now
nevertheless.
you have a good one with a
Damn
good person.
Damn right.
And you have a sense of grounding that's coming from this family that is evolving with you now, and that is something that guy in Golden Pigeon on Delsey Drive was not capable of.
Well, that guy can't ever go back.
You have
again.
another one?
I mean, I could
Oh,
visit. I could go down there and visit, but I can't walk in the house I grew up in.
Well, and that's just it. You no
Right.
longer have any ties to Vineland.
Exactly.
My family has every tie it's had for at least 100 years, and some of them for longer.
Yeah.
And my family is still all down there.
Yeah. It's a very strange feeling, but in a way, it's good because it means I can only move forward, and I can just look back.
And for me, it's good because when the city has beaten the shit out of me again and again and again, and when my students have beaten the shit out of me again as they did this year, and when the noise gets too much and the drama gets too much, I can go to my parents' house where it's quiet, and I can relearn how to be a Vinelander. Because I think for me, as I'm approaching middle age, very gracefully, I think what is now my job for myself is to learn how to be Vineland for myself in the city.
That's some wise shit right there.
It's to learn how to have that sense of quiet in a very noisy industry, in a very noisy profession. Yeah.
Oh, tell me about it.
In a very noisy environment. I do well with chaos. I do well with chaos. I thrive on it, but only to a degree.
Yes.
And Vineland is the place where I can go and relearn what I knew growing up, so I can refresh and bring it back to where I am.
That's a missing piece that I feel right now.
Which is why I'm always trying to get you to my mother's house.
Yeah, but it's not. And don't take this.
I know.
It's not the same.
I know.
Like, I stayed with my aunt, and it was wonderful.
It's not the same.
It is not the same.
Yep.
You know, my fantasy is to make enough money one day to just buy that house and just have it. Just have it. Like, that much money. Where it would be an afterthought. Like, let's just buy up the old house and have it.
It's kind of like how I want my old convertible, that I sold 2 weeks after I met Kyle.
That's right. Are you still on your mission to find it?
It's subsided a little bit as my latest emotional state has withered back down to normality. The driving need to recapture who I was, before the last 10 years happened, has also subsided.
Well, this has been incredible. Thank you for coming over.
Oh, there's so much more to cover.
There's so much more, and
my pleasure. Thank you.
You've listed like 7 other topics that we could.
I only just started.
Yes, of course. And hopefully this will keep going, so we'll have you on again.
I'm an asshole.
Why do you say that?
I love you dearly, and I am such a talkative little asshole.
That's
bitch.
why you're one of the best guests I could possibly have. I love it.
That's the outcut.
It's good material. All right, Kevin, if that is indeed your real name.
Time to time, like refusal to the child inside. By and by, another piece of me is dying. Why, oh why, must vengeance be my one obsession? When I just want to be left alone. But again, as I contemplate my own damnation, to accept my own salvation, and I shall attend to discarding I have newly entered, so full of sin, where the apples grow so well, mesmerized by my exposure to this mass insanity, characterized by what I mostly leave undone. Better the lies than the truth it seems these days are angry, and I am thinking of wandering home, dawning of hope, chanting and so thin, shatters like a pane of glass upon my heart and skin, but as I contemplate my own damnation, I can't begin to accept my own salvation, and I shall attend to discarding I have newly entered, so full of sin, where the apples grow so well. So obligating, it's hard to see through all this light and sound.
This just in, we have received an update on the Vineland Progresso plant that was just previously discussed in this podcast. So, would you like to read the title of this article from Vineland's Daily Journal newspaper?
It's official. Vineland Progresso plant to close next summer.
Well done. City officials and union management hoped it wouldn't come to this, but General Mills on Monday announced its final decision to close Vineland's Progresso plant next summer. Operations at the facility will move to General Mills Progresso plant in Hannibal, Montana, MO. According to company spokesperson Kelsey Romehilt, about 370 employees will be infected. About 370 employees will be affected by the Vineland plant closure. General Mills said it will provide, quote, severance and transition benefits to each worker. The company initially announced its tentative plans to close the Vineland plant on July 21st, sending shockwaves through the region. The reason given was a desire to consolidate operations and a dip in the soup industry. Get it? A dip in the soup industry? State Senator Jeff Van Drew expressed his disappointment. Quote, needless to say, I'm tremendously disappointed, but not tremendously surprised, Van Drew told the Daily Journal. There seemed to be nothing that we could do, no incentive or plan that we could put in place that would keep Progresso in Vineland. The Progresso brand traces its start to Italian immigrant Giuseppe Udo, who in 1907 started a small business in New Orleans that imported tomato paste and olives, according to the General Mills website. That business later became Progresso Incorporated when it expanded to California and New York. Udo, in 1942, bought a factory in Vineland, where the company started making soups. In 1969, after Udo's death, the company was sold to General Mills. General Mills acquired the factory at 500 W West Elmer Road from Pillsbury Company in 2001. Romehilt said the plant will close at the end of the first fiscal quarter of 2018, which means the end of summer 2017. Progresso plans to celebrate its 75th anniversary in 2017. Well, there you have it, folks. What do you think about it? No comment. No comment at all. Okay, folks, I've been deciding whether or not to play this song from Kevin, but it wouldn't be true to the spirit of the Opus Marcus podcast if I didn't. So, consider this the climax of this episode, and there will be some falling action and resolution if you stick around. But first, here's the song by Kevin Cummines. It's called Spent.
You hotel.
Since Kevin and I spent so much time talking about our hometown Vineland, it seems only fitting to share with you this story, which imagines our town as a post-apocalyptic utopia in the midst of chaos and destruction throughout the rest of the world. This is called Surviving in Vineland. DC was hit first. Then the evacuation started. Only so many made it out before New York City was hit a few days later. Then there was nowhere to go. Philly was fried. The Delaware River spiked with tons of acid. Even if we could make it to the coast, enemy submarines waited offshore. South Jersey was a veritable island. We were on our own for however long it took the world to finish collapsing around us. I have to admit that I secretly wished for something like this to happen. I expected it to happen, and my greatest fear was that, like all my other expectations, this one would also fail to come true, and I would be forced to live out the rest of my days in utter mediocrity. While everyone else huddled around their battery-powered radios sobbing, I secretly thought to myself, this is the reboot. It felt like I had skipped the grief cycle, gone all the way to acceptance, while most of my family and friends were still in the bargaining phase. They wanted desperately to believe that our great institutions would save us, even as they crumbled to digital dust. So while they slowly came to the realization that their lives would never be the same, I was already preparing for what happens next. 3 months later, I had many ideals on how to survive in this new reality, but no one would take them seriously. One night, I completely lost my shit and ended up crying next to a statue of dead Jesus at the cemetery shrine in East Vineland. Eventually, I decided that I would strike out on my own, head north into the central Jersey wasteland and try to find my friends, Doug, Russ, or even Attila and Noel. There was nothing for me here anyway. Parents were in Florida, probably hysterical over me and Mike. I certainly couldn't live with Mike. Even in the end times, we may end up strangling each other to death. I wouldn't fit in anywhere else. Everyone who was married thought only of the survival of their children. They perched in windows from their powerless homes, aiming guns and shouting threats at any who came near their property. The poor deluded bastards didn't realize the truth. Nobody owns a thing. They only possess it for a time. Everyone who was single I couldn't see shacking up with. The hermit streak ran strong. Once I had accepted that I would always be a loner, that I was free to make my own choices. In a way, those were the best days. No job to slave at, no government to answer to, no more pretending. It was like Camus' The Plague. Under the shadow of 2 mushroom clouds, ordinary life in South Jersey took on a sense of hyper-realness. Children played in the streets. The poorer neighborhoods actually began to share supplies and skills. The bars and clubs filled with those living each day like it would be their last. For many, it was. The invasions changed all that. I think what happened is that death did not come soon enough for those still partying, and the ones who kept living out the old life secretly expected some kind of rescue. When I say the invasions, I am referring in a large sense to whatever is happening outside of our bubble. We still don't know which foreign entity is on American soil, but it definitely has a trickle-down effect. Bandits and rogue mutants from North Jersey have set fire to the Pine Barrens. Pirate boats from Baltimore Harbor have pillaged Sea Isle City. I remember clearly when the 60,000 or so residents of Vineland went completely crazy. There were riots on Landis Avenue, and rival gangs took over all of our Walmarts and Wawas. Instead of pulling together, most people just fell apart. Not us. Mike was the first to go along with my plan. Phil and John just happened to be next door with their parents and babies and the babies' mamas. Becky was down the street with her parents and brother. Even the 3 Snars brothers held up their end of Victory Ave. Phil and I actually made it happen. We snuck through old backyards like it was just another game of late-night jailbreak when we were kids. We made it to the Memorial School parking lot and hot-wired one of the buses. To this day, I can't believe I was the first one to think of doing that. Long story short, we convinced as many people as possible on Victory Ave and the surrounding neighborhood to get on that first bus. Then we drove them back to Memorial School and encouraged them all to take a bus, fill it with more people and supplies, then meet at Mananico Colony. If the city of Vineland proper was no longer forgotten by the outside world, surely that abandoned acreage of that once thriving colony for morons still would be. By dusk the next day, a mini battalion of school buses paraded down Palermo Avenue, past Rossi School, and into the mysterious Mananico grounds. They'll find us eventually. I realize now that I will never leave this place. I am too needed. Everyone here has found a role. Mine is part-time teacher, full-time shaman. At least, that's how the others now perceive me. For the record, I've been making this whole thing up one precious day at a time. Although, in full disclosure, learning how to communicate with interdimensional entities has helped tremendously. As for the others, my brother Mike has really stepped up. He actually keeps the crazies in check, and under his command they have defended us from 3 separate attacks by rival gangs from Millville. Last week, Mike killed a feral pig with his bare hands. Phil designed a rudimentary sanitation system, and he thinks that after a few raids on some plumbing supply stores, he could make a functioning well happen. Becky's dad is an architect, and he's in his glory organizing the reconstruction of the church and school buildings. Diane takes care of all the animals, and Anita, our resident nurse, heals us humans. Becky and Ben brew us beer to imbibe. Phil's brother John has organized a landscaping project, and my old landlords Rhonda and Alex are nurturing gardens teeming with goodies. They remind me of Longwood Gardens in Pennsylvania. Last reports from there told of a giant hogweed that was, quote, consciously devouring the surrounding ecosystem. At any rate, our seeds are still pure. I don't know about no hogweed, but I know what I like, and we grow some of the most potent South Jersey swag you'll ever smoke. Amanda cooks for everybody, and her husband Dan does pretty much everything else around here that requires a real man. My Uncle Dennis, an electrician, is the one who made it possible for me to access what's left of the panpsychic egonet to send out this proverbial message in a bottle. Is there anybody out there? As for Center City, Vineland, Landis Theater and the adjacent Eastside Motel are festering dens of perverse iniquity. The only building still intact and undamaged is Sacred Heart Church. I often go there to sit in the bell tower and pick off zombies with a lightning gun. Only a fool would think that we're completely isolated. We must be ever vigilant in case of attack. The fire is dimming. I'm tired. Survival pushes thoughts of the past away, and I never cared much for the future. Right now, I can hear the rain beating on the metal frame of the number 42 school bus that I've called home for the last 3 years. The children are asleep. They tell me they dream of their mother. I dream of her too, sometimes. Maybe someday I will see my crew from up north again, or maybe they're all mutants. One thing is certain. Every day I open my eyes, grateful and with a sense of purpose. The rest, they once said, is history.
There's not a lot I'm missing about the way things used to be. I don't lie in bed wishing you were beside me. And I never dial your number and then hang up before it rings. I'm so above all those little things. And on the days when I get lonely, I don't wish that you were here. Oh no, my dear, I haven't shed one tear. But I'm cold, so cold, and I don't know what to do. I can't help myself, I shiver when I'm beside you. And I'm cold, so cold, and you say I was cold to you. Well, I can't stand, no, I can't stand being. I know you think I'm getting everything that I deserve, but the hardest lessons are the ones you've taught but never learned. And I'm glad we're not together, I've got my friends convinced we're through. And I didn't take out your picture last night just to look at you. And if I happen to hear you laughing when you don't know that I'm around, it doesn't get me down, I still like that sound. So cold, and I don't know what to do. I can't help myself, I shiver when I'm beside you. And I'm cold, so cold, and you say I was cold to you. Well, I can't stand, no, I can't stand. If this is how it was for you, when every breath I took, it chilled you. If every time I turned from you, you thought it should have killed you. If I froze your heart against me like mine is now, I take it all back if somehow I could stop being cold. But I'm cold, so cold, and I don't know what to do. I can't help myself, I shiver when I'm beside you. So cold, and you say I was cold to you. Well, I can't stand, no, I can't stand being cold.
If you've made it this far, thanks for listening. Thanks to Kevin for being on episode 3 of the Opus Marcus podcast. Please visit opusmarcuspodcast.com. And until the next episode, peace out. What's your advice for people in life?
My advice is to stay strong, be helpful, be smart, be brave, be powerful, be kind, and be loving to everyone, even your pets. Let's say something bad happened to you. Move on. It already happened. Just move on to the better things in life. What a heck of time!
So I've got about 3 minutes and 40 seconds to kill if I wanted to make this podcast an even 2 hours, which I'm going to do. So consider this a bonus hidden track if you made it this far. I'm going to read the Wikipedia article on Vineland's history. Charles K. Landis purchased 30,000 acres of land in 1861 and another 23,000 acres in 1874 near Millville, New Jersey, and along the West Jersey Railroad line with service between Camden and Cape May, to create his own alcohol-free utopian society based on agriculture and progressive thinking. The first houses were built in 1862, and train service was established to Philadelphia and New York City, with the population reaching 5,500 by 1865 and 11,000 by 1875. Established as a temperance town where the sale of alcohol was prohibited, Landis required that purchasers of land in Vineland had to build a house on the purchased property within a year of purchase, that 2.5 acres of the often heavily wooded land had to be cleared and farmed each year, and that adequate space be placed between houses and roads to allow for planting of flowers and shade trees along the routes through town. Landis Avenue was constructed as a 100-foot wide and about 1 mile long road running east-west through the center of the community, with other narrow roads connecting at right angles to each other. After determining that the Vineland soil was well suited for growing grapes, hence the name, Landis started advertising to attract Italian grape growers to Vineland, offering 20 acres of land that had to be cleared and used to grow grapes. Thomas Branwell Welch founded Welch's Grape Juice and purchased the locally grown grapes to make, quote, unfermented wine, unquote, or grape juice. The fertile ground also attracted the glass-making industry and was home to the Progresso Soup Company. Throughout the first half of the 20th century, most of the city was involved in the poultry industry, which led to the city being dubbed the Egg Basket of America. Vineland Poultry Laboratories, now Lohman Animal Health, was started by Arthur Goldhaft. Dr. Goldhaft is credited with putting, quote, a chicken in every pot, end quote, after developing the fowl pox chicken vaccine that saved millions of chickens from death. Dr. Goldhaft's work at Vineland Poultry Laboratories in Vineland helped protect the world's chicken supply from the fowl pox disease. Vineland had New Jersey's first school for the intellectual disabled, the Vineland Developmental Center, which now has an east and west campus. These institutions housed mentally handicapped women in fully staffed cottages. Henry H. Goddard, an American psychologist, coined the term moron while directing the research laboratory at the training school for backward and feeble-minded children in Vineland. This facility was so sufficiently well known that one American Prison Association pamphlet in 1955 heralded Vineland as, quote, famous for its contributions to our knowledge of the feeble-minded, end quote. Of all the municipalities in New Jersey to hold the label of city, Vineland is the largest in total area. And finally, Vineland's motto, a harvest of opportunities in the heart of the Northeast.